Romantic bricklayer at dinner with millionaire CEO. The spoon changed everything. Just before we start, this community spans every continent. Drop your city's name if you feel comfortable sharing. Marcus Thompson wiped the concrete dust from his weathered hands as he stepped back to admire his work. The brick wall stood perfectly straight, each stone placed with the precision that had made him Chicago's most requested mason at 35. His calloused fingers traced the mortar lines, rough hands that had built dreams for others but never his own. "Marcus!" called Jimmy Rodriguez from across the construction site. "There's some fancy lady here asking for you." Behind Jimmy stood a vision that made Marcus's heart skip. Victoria Sterling, 27, and radiating confidence in her tailored navy suit, looked completely out of place among the construction debris. Her emerald eyes met his, and something electric passed between them. "Mr. Thompson," she said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. "I'm Victoria Sterling, CEO of Sterling Enterprises. I've been watching your work on our downtown renovation." Marcus stared at her outstretched hand, then at his own dust-covered palms. My hands are dirty, miss. Victoria, and I don't mind." She grasped his rough hand firmly. "Your craftsmanship is extraordinary. That brick facade on 5th Street, pure artistry." Heat rose in Marcus's cheeks. No one had ever called his work artistry. "Just laying bricks, ma'am." "It's much more than that." Victoria's smile was warm, genuine. "I have a proposition. Sterling Enterprises is hosting our annual charity gala next Saturday at the Palmer House. 500 guests, including the mayor and several business leaders. I'd like you to be my guest." The construction site fell silent. Jimmy's mouth hung open. Marcus felt dizzy. "Me? At a gala?" He looked down at his work boots, steel-toed and scuffed. "I don't think I'm the kind of person who belongs at fancy parties." "I think you're exactly the kind of person who should be there." Victoria pulled a cream-colored envelope from her purse. "The invitation includes formal wear arrangement if needed. 7 o'clock. As she walked away, her heels clicking confidently on the concrete, Marcus stood frozen, holding the invitation like it might explode. "Dude," Jimmy whispered, "do you know who that was? Victoria Sterling is worth like $50 million. She's been on Forbes magazine covers." Marcus's hands trembled as he opened the envelope. Inside, gold lettering announced, "You are cordially invited." His stomach churned. He'd never even been inside a restaurant with tablecloths. That night, Marcus sat in his small apartment staring at the invitation. The walls were bare, except for a photo of his late father, also a mason, who'd taught him that honest work was the only wealth that mattered. "What would you do, Pop?" he whispered to the photograph. "A woman like that. What could she want with someone like me?" His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Looking forward to Saturday. Don't overthink it, Victoria." Marcus set down the phone, his heart pounding. In 6 days, he'd either make the biggest fool of himself in Chicago's history, or something magical might happen. Saturday arrived like an approaching thunderstorm. Marcus stood in the formal wear shop, feeling like an imposter, as the elderly tailor, Mr. Goldstein, adjusted his tuxedo. "First time in formal wear, son?" Mr. Goldstein asked, his European accent thick with understanding. "Is it that obvious?" Marcus tugged at the bow tie, which felt like a noose. "I've been dressing men for 40 years, I can tell." The tailor's hands worked expertly. "But you wear it well. Strong shoulders, honest posture, that's worth more than breeding." Marcus studied himself in the three-way mirror. The man looking back was someone he barely recognized, sophisticated, distinguished. But inside, his stomach churned with terror. "What if I embarrass myself?" he confessed. "What if I use the wrong fork, or say something stupid?" Mr. Goldstein smiled. "My grandfather was a stonemason in Prague. When he came to America, he said the same thing about his first business dinner. You know what he told me? Character doesn't change with clothing, Eli. Good men stay good no matter what they wear." An hour later, Marcus stood outside the Palmer House Hilton, its grand entrance blazing with lights. Luxury cars deposited guests in evening gowns and tuxedos. He watched through the windows as elegant people moved like dancers through the lobby. His phone buzzed. "I'm in the Aurora Ballroom." Can't wait to see you. V. Taking a deep breath, Marcus walked through the revolving door. The lobby was a cathedral of marble and crystal, more opulent than anything he'd ever imagined. Guests moved in clusters, their laughter tinkling like wind chimes. Marcus. He turned and nearly forgot how to breathe. Victoria descended the grand staircase in a flowing emerald gown that matched her eyes. Her dark hair was swept into an elegant updo, revealing a graceful neck adorned with diamonds. She was absolutely stunning. "You clean up nicely," she said, taking his arm. Her touch sent electricity through his entire body. "You look," Marcus struggled for words, "like something from a movie." Victoria laughed, a sound like silver bells. "Thank you. Are you ready for this?" "Honestly, I'm terrified." His voice cracked slightly. "I've never been anywhere like this." "Good," she said, surprising him. "That means you're still real." As they entered the ballroom, Marcus's eyes widened. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow patterns across walls adorned with priceless artwork. Round tables draped in white linen filled the space, each set with more silverware than Marcus owned. A string quartet played near a dance floor where couples moved gracefully. Victoria, a distinguished man in his 60s, approached them. "Darling, you look radiant." "Senator Morrison, I'd like you to meet Marcus Thompson." "Marcus, Senator Patrick Morrison." The senator extended his hand, and Marcus shook it firmly, grateful his father had taught him that much about meeting important people. But as they were seated at Victoria's table, right at the front, near the stage, Marcus's confidence crumbled. The place setting before him looked like a surgical instrument display. Marcus stared at the bewildering array of silverware surrounding his plate. 3 forks on the left, 2 knives and 3 spoons on the right, plus mysterious implements above his plate he couldn't even identify. His palms began to sweat. "The salad course is being served," Victoria whispered, noticing his panic. "Start with the outermost fork." But as the waiter placed a small plate of mixed greens before him, Marcus's hands froze. Everyone else at the table, a federal judge, 2 bank presidents, and a renowned surgeon, picked up their forks with natural ease. Marcus reached for his, knocked over his water glass, and watched in horror as the liquid spread across the white tablecloth. "Oh God," he muttered, grabbing his napkin to dab at the mess. "I'm so sorry." "It's perfectly fine," Victoria said calmly, signaling the waiter, who appeared instantly with fresh linens. But Marcus's face burned with embarrassment. Judge Patricia Henley, seated across from him, raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Thompson, Victoria tells us you're in construction." "Yes, ma'am, I'm a mason." His voice barely rose above a whisper. "How interesting." Her tone suggested it was anything but. "And how did you two meet?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Marcus felt every eye at the table on him, waiting for an explanation that would make sense of why Chicago's most eligible CEO had brought a working-class nobody to the social event of the year. Victoria's hand found his under the table, her fingers intertwining with his. "Marcus rebuilt the exterior of our downtown building. His work is absolutely magnificent, the kind of craftsmanship you don't see anymore." The surgeon, Dr. William Chang, leaned forward. "Craftsmanship is certainly admirable, though I imagine it's quite different from this." He gestured around the opulent ballroom. Marcus felt like a bug under a microscope. He picked up what he hoped was the correct fork and attempted to eat his salad. The greens slipped and slid, refusing to stay on his utensil. Everyone else seemed to manage effortlessly, but each bite was a struggle for him. "The key," Victoria said softly, demonstrating, "is to use the knife to help guide the lettuce onto the fork, like this." She showed him the technique, her movements graceful and natural. "You're teaching him table manners at the table." Judge Henley's voice carried across to neighboring tables, and Marcus noticed several people turning to stare. "I think it's sweet," said Margaret Patterson, the bank president's wife. "Young love conquering all barriers." Marcus wanted to disappear, but Victoria straightened in her chair, her voice carrying new steel. "Actually, Patricia, I find authenticity refreshing." Marcus doesn't pretend to be something he's not. That's rare in our circles. The tension at the table was thick enough to cut. Marcus pushed the salad around his plate, his appetite completely gone. He'd made a terrible mistake coming here. He didn't belong in Victoria's world, and everyone knew it. When the main course arrived, some kind of fish with fancy sauce, Marcus watched Victoria cut her portion into small, elegant bites. He tried to copy her technique, but struggled with the unfamiliar fish knife. "Here," Victoria said so quietly only he could hear. "Hold it like this." She adjusted his grip, her fingers warm against his. Gentle pressure. Let the knife do the work. Under Victoria's patient guidance, Marcus began to find his rhythm. She taught him subtly, without making a show of it, how to hold his wineglass by the stem, which fork to use for the fish course, when to stand as the elderly Mrs. Whitmore approached their table. "The secret," she whispered during a brief lull, "is that most of these rules are completely arbitrary. They only matter because we agree they matter." Marcus managed a small smile, like knowing which brick goes where in a wall. "Exactly. Except your rules create something beautiful and lasting. These rules just keep people in their proper places." Her words carried an edge of criticism that surprised him. He'd assumed someone like Victoria would embrace all aspects of this world. As dinner progressed, Marcus found himself relaxing slightly. Victoria's presence beside him was both calming and intoxicating. She smelled like jasmine and something uniquely her. When she laughed at his quiet observation about the ice sculpture looking like a melting snowman, her whole face lit up. "Ladies and gentlemen," announced the evening's host from the podium, "it's time for our annual charity auction. Remember, all proceeds benefit the Chicago Children's Hospital." Items were called out one by one: artwork, vacation packages, signed sports memorabilia. The bidding was aggressive, with paddles flying up for thousands of dollars without hesitation. Marcus watched in amazement as people spent his annual salary on a weekend in Napa Valley. Then came the item that changed everything. "Next, we have a unique opportunity," the auctioneer announced. "A private cooking lesson with renowned chef Antoine Dubois in his restaurant kitchen, including a 5-course meal for two. Bidding starts at $5,000. Paddles shot up immediately. 6,000. 7. 8. Marcus watched Victoria's face change. She sat forward, her eyes bright with interest. 10,000, called Judge Henley. 12. Victoria raised her paddle and Marcus's stomach dropped. He'd never seen that much money in one place. 15,000, a voice from across the room. Victoria looked at Marcus, then back at the auctioneer. Something determined settled in her expression. 20,000? The room went quiet. Even the auctioneer seemed surprised by the jump. 20,000 going once, twice. His gavel hung in the air. 25. Judge Henley's voice cut through the silence, and she smiled smugly at Victoria. Marcus saw Victoria's jaw tighten. This had become personal. 30,000, Victoria said calmly, raising her paddle. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Marcus felt dizzy. $30,000 was more than he made in 8 months. Judge Henley hesitated, then slowly shook her head. "Sold to Miss Sterling for $30,000. Applause filled the room, but Marcus barely heard it. Victoria had just spent an astronomical amount on a cooking lesson. His practical mind reeled at the extravagance. "Why?" he asked quietly, as the applause died down. Victoria turned to face him, her green eyes serious. "Because I want to learn something new. With you." The simple honesty of her answer hit him harder than any expensive gift could have. She hadn't bought the lesson to show off or prove a point. She'd bought it to spend time with him, doing something that would matter to both of them. After the auction, couples began moving toward the dance floor as the string quartet transitioned to classical waltzes. Marcus watched them glide across the polished marble, their movements fluid and practiced. His hands, which could shape stone and mortar with perfect precision, suddenly felt clumsy and uncertain. "Would you like to dance?" Victoria asked, reading his thoughts. I don't know how," Marcus admitted, his cheeks flushing. "I mean, not like that, not fancy dancing." Victoria stood and extended her hand. Then it's time for another lesson. Here? In front of everyone? Marcus's voice cracked slightly, especially in front of everyone. Her smile was mischievous. Besides, I have a theory that men who work with their hands have natural rhythm. Reluctantly, Marcus allowed her to lead him to the edge of the dance floor. Other couples moved around them in perfect synchronization, the men leading confidently, the women following gracefully. Marcus felt like he was about to step into a minefield. "Put your right hand here," Victoria said, placing his palm against her waist. The contact sent electricity through his entire arm. "Your left hand holds mine and we start with your right foot." "Right foot where?" Marcus asked, panic rising. "Just step backward. I'll follow." Victoria's voice was patient, encouraging. "Don't think so much. Feel the music." Marcus took a tentative step back, then another. Victoria moved with him, her dress flowing like water. For a moment it almost worked. Then he stepped on her foot. "Oh God, I'm sorry." Marcus started to pull away, but Victoria held firm. "It's fine. Try again. Smaller steps." They began again, and this time Marcus managed 3 steps before stumbling slightly. Victoria caught his rhythm and adjusted, making him look more graceful than he felt. "You're doing it," she whispered, and Marcus realized with amazement that they were actually dancing. Not well, not smoothly, but they were moving together across the floor. Other couples had begun to notice. Some smiled encouragingly, but Marcus caught a few pointed looks and whispered comments. Judge Henley stood at the edge of the dance floor with 2 other women, their disapproval obvious. "They're staring," Marcus said, his confidence wavering. "Let them." Victoria's grip tightened slightly. "Marcus, look at me. Just me." When he met her eyes, the rest of the room seemed to fade. Her face was radiant in the chandelier light, her smile genuine and warm. For a moment nothing else mattered, not his clumsy feet, not the judgmental stares, not the vast difference in their worlds. "There you are," she said softly. "I was wondering when you'd stop hiding from me." "I'm not hiding." But even as he said it, Marcus knew it wasn't entirely true. He'd been holding back all evening, trying to be someone he wasn't. "You are, and I understand why. But Marcus," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "I didn't invite you here because I wanted you to be like everyone else. I invited you because you're different. Because when you talk about your work, your whole face lights up. Because you have calluses from building beautiful things with your hands." The song ended, and applause filled the ballroom. Marcus realized they'd been dancing for nearly 10 minutes, and he'd actually enjoyed it. "Thank you," he said, meaning more than just the dance lesson. "Thank you for trusting me enough to try." Victoria's smile was radiant. "Now I believe they're serving dessert, and I'm curious to see if you can master the dessert spoon." Marcus laughed, the first genuine laugh he'd had all evening. "I'm pretty sure I can figure that one out." The dessert course arrived with theatrical flair, a delicate chocolate soufflé accompanied by raspberry coulis and gold leaf garnish. Marcus stared at the artistic creation, afraid to disturb its perfection. "It's meant to be eaten, not admired," Victoria said with amusement. As Marcus carefully navigated the dessert spoon, Victoria began sharing stories from her childhood. "People assume I grew up in luxury, but my father built sterling enterprises from nothing. He was a plumber's son from the South Side who worked 18-hour days to give me opportunities he never had." Marcus looked up, surprised. A plumber's son. Robert Sterling started with a small electrical contracting business in a garage. "My earliest memories are of him coming home covered in sawdust and wire cuts, exhausted but determined." Her voice grew soft with memory. "He taught me that honest work is noble work, regardless of whether you wear a suit or coveralls." "What happened to him?" Marcus asked gently. "Heart attack when I was 19. I inherited everything, the business, the responsibility, the pressure to prove I belonged in a world that still sees women as anomalies in boardrooms." Victoria's fork paused halfway to her mouth. "Sometimes I think he died from the stress of trying to fit into places that never really accepted him." The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. Victoria wasn't just some privileged princess playing with a working-class man for amusement. She understood the weight of crossing social boundaries because she'd watched her father struggle with it. "Is that why you invited me tonight?" he asked. "Because of your father?" Victoria considered the question seriously. "Partly, but mostly because when I watched you work, I saw the same passion my father had. The same pride in creating something lasting and—" She hesitated, color rising in her cheeks. "Because you looked at me like I was just a woman, not a dollar sign or a business opportunity. You are just a woman." The words slipped out before Marcus could stop them, and Victoria's eyes widened. "I mean, when you handed me that invitation, all I saw was someone beautiful who somehow thought I was worth noticing. The money stuff, that scares me." "It should," Victoria said quietly. "Money changes everything. It makes people pretend to like you, makes them see opportunities instead of connections. It's lonely." Marcus reached across the table and covered her hand with his. "For what it's worth, I liked you before I knew who you were. When Jimmy told me you were famous and rich, it just made me more confused about why you'd want to spend time with me." Victoria turned her hand palm up, interlacing their fingers. Maybe that's exactly why. The evening was winding down, guests beginning to filter out of the ballroom. Marcus had survived his first high society event, though barely. More importantly, he'd discovered that Victoria Sterling wasn't just a wealthy CEO. She was a woman carrying her own fears and hopes, just like him. "Marcus," Victoria said as they prepared to leave, "would you like to have coffee sometime, somewhere without formal place settings?" Marcus smiled, feeling lighter than he had all evening. "I know a great diner on the north side. They serve coffee in regular mugs and nobody cares which fork you use." "Perfect." Victoria's laugh was like music. "Though after tonight, I think you've earned your etiquette degree." As they walked toward the exit, Marcus caught sight of their reflection in the ballroom's mirrors. They looked like they belonged together. The woman in the emerald gown and the man in the perfectly fitted tuxedo. But more than that, they looked happy. Neither of them noticed Judge Henley watching from across the room, her phone in her hand, already composing a text that would change everything. Monday morning arrived with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Marcus was mixing mortar when his phone exploded with notifications, text after text, call after call. His hands shook as he pulled off his work gloves to check the screen. The first message was from his sister Sarah. "Marcus, call me now. There's something online about you." Then Jimmy, "Dude, you're famous, and not in a good way." With growing dread, Marcus opened the link Sarah had sent. The headline made his blood freeze. "Millionaire CEO's charity case, Victoria Sterling's latest publicity stunt." The article was brutal. Photos from the gala showed him stumbling through the dance, Victoria teaching him table manners, his obvious discomfort throughout the evening. But worse were the anonymous quotes. She was literally teaching him how to hold a fork. It was painful to watch. Sterling Enterprises stock dropped 2 points this morning. Investors are questioning her judgment. Sources close to Sterling confirm this is a publicity stunt for her upcoming IPO expansion. Marcus's phone rang. Victoria's name on the screen. "Marcus, please don't believe—" "Is it true?" His voice was hoarse. "Am I just some publicity stunt?" "No. God, no. Marcus, meet me somewhere. Let me explain." "Explain what? That you picked the most pathetic guy you could find to make yourself look charitable?" Pain and humiliation crashed over him in waves. "That's not— I have to go." Marcus hung up, his hands trembling with rage and embarrassment. Jimmy approached cautiously. "Man, you okay?" "I'm an idiot." Marcus threw his phone into his toolbox. "A complete idiot for thinking someone like her could actually want someone like me. But at the gala, you guys looked like a rich woman and her charity project." Marcus grabbed his sledgehammer and attacked the wall they were supposed to be carefully dismantling. "That's all I ever was." Each swing released more fury. How could he have been so stupid? Victoria Sterling, worth $50 million, genuinely interested in a nobody mason. The fairy tale had always been too good to be true. His phone buzzed again. Victoria's text. "The article is lies. Please let me show you the truth." Marcus deleted it without responding. By afternoon, 3 news vans had found the construction site. Reporters thrust microphones at Marcus, shouting questions. "How does it feel to be Victoria Sterling's charity case? Did you know you were being used for publicity?" "No comment," Marcus growled, pushing past them. But the damage was spreading. The construction foreman, Mr. Patterson, pulled him aside. "Marcus, I'm sorry, but Sterling Enterprises is one of our biggest clients. They've requested you be removed from their projects." "They what?" "Effective immediately. I'm sorry, son. This publicity, it's not good for business." Marcus felt his world crumbling. Not only had he been humiliated publicly, but now his livelihood was threatened. All because he'd been foolish enough to believe a beautiful woman could see something worthwhile in him. That evening, Marcus sat in his empty apartment, scrolling through increasingly vicious social media posts. Charity Case was trending. Memes showed him fumbling with silverware. Comments ranged from pity to outright mockery. One post stopped him cold. A photo of Victoria leaving her downtown office, surrounded by reporters. Her face was composed, but Marcus could see the strain around her eyes. The caption read, "Sterling Enterprises CEO refuses to comment on Mason scandal." Mason scandal. That's what he'd become. His phone rang again. Victoria. Again, he let it go to voicemail. But when the phone immediately rang again, he answered. "What?" "Marcus, please, just listen to me for 2 minutes." "I listened Saturday night. Look where it got me. The article is full of lies. Judge Henley planted that story because I outbid her at the auction. She's been trying to damage my reputation for years. So this is about your reputation, not about me being humiliated in front of the entire city. No, it's about both of us being hurt by people who can't stand seeing others happy." Victoria's voice cracked slightly. "Marcus, what we had Saturday night was real. Everything I told you was real." Marcus wanted to believe her, but the pain was too fresh, the embarrassment too raw. "Even if that's true," he said quietly, "this proves we don't belong in the same world. I can't survive in your life, Victoria, and you shouldn't have to defend yourself for spending time with me." The silence stretched between them. "So that's it," she whispered. "You're giving up on us because some bitter people wrote lies." "I'm being realistic. Goodbye, Victoria." Marcus hung up and turned off his phone. Outside his window, Chicago glittered in the distance, beautiful and unreachable as ever. 3 weeks passed in a blur of humiliation and isolation. Marcus threw himself into work, taking whatever construction jobs he could find outside the city, where his face wasn't recognized. The physical labor helped, but couldn't silence the constant replay of Saturday night. The way Victoria had looked at him, the warmth in her laugh, the feeling that maybe, just maybe, someone extraordinary had seen something worthwhile in him. The worst part wasn't the embarrassment. It was the growing certainty that he'd made a terrible mistake. Sarah finally cornered him at his apartment on a rainy Thursday evening, letting herself in with the spare key he'd forgotten she had. "You look like hell," she announced, surveying his unshaven face and the pizza boxes stacked on his coffee table. "Thanks. Great to see you too." Marcus didn't look up from the baseball game on his ancient television. "We need to talk." Sarah sat down and grabbed the remote, turning off the TV. "About Victoria Sterling. There's nothing to talk about." "The hell there isn't." Sarah pulled out her phone. "I did some research on this Judge Henley, who wrote that article." Despite himself, Marcus looked over. Sarah had always been the smart one in the family, working as an investigative journalist for the Chicago Tribune. "Patricia Henley has been waging a personal vendetta against Victoria Sterling for 2 years," Sarah continued. "Ever since Sterling Enterprises won a city contract that Henley's husband's firm wanted, she's planted 3 other hit pieces about Victoria in different publications." Marcus felt something stir in his chest. "So?" So the quotes in that article, I tracked them down. 2 were from Henley's friends, and 1 was completely fabricated. There was no source close to Sterling Enterprises because I called them. Victoria hasn't spoken to the press about you at all. That doesn't change anything, doesn't it? Sarah leaned forward. Marcus, do you remember when Dad died and you were 18, working construction to pay for my college? You could have taken the scholarship to trade school, but you gave it up so I could get my journalism degree. That was different. No, it wasn't. You've spent your whole life believing you're not good enough for anything better. You turned down the foreman position at Henderson Construction because you thought you didn't deserve it. You never asked Rebecca Martinez out in high school, even though she was crazy about you, because her family had money, and now you're doing it again. Marcus stood up, agitated. This isn't about me feeling sorry for myself. This is about reality. Victoria and I live in different worlds. Says who? Some bitter judge who planted a fake story. Says everyone who saw us together. I was a joke, Sarah. I couldn't even hold a fork properly. So what? Sarah's voice rose. You think knowing which fork to use makes someone a better person? You think because Victoria has money she's automatically better than you? I think she deserves someone who can fit into her life without embarrassing her. Sarah stared at him for a long moment. You know what's really embarrassing, Marcus? Giving up on love because you're afraid of what other people think. She pulled up another screen on her phone. One more thing. Sterling Enterprises stock didn't drop because of your relationship. It dropped because Henley's husband leaked false information about a merger. The SEC is investigating him for market manipulation. Marcus felt the ground shifting beneath him. How do you know all this? Because I'm a reporter, and this story stinks. Also because Victoria Sterling called me. She what? Yesterday. She's been trying to reach you for weeks. She wanted me to tell you the truth about the article, but she also wanted me to tell you something else. Sarah paused. She's withdrawing from public appearances, cutting back on social events. She said Chicago's high society can go to hell if they're going to attack good people for sport. Marcus sank back onto his couch. She said that? Her exact words were more colorful, but yes, Sarah smiled. Marcus, this woman fought for you even when you wouldn't fight for yourself. She turned down 3 TV interviews where she could have defended herself because she didn't want to drag you further into the spotlight. For the first time in weeks, Marcus felt something other than shame and anger. Hope, fragile and tentative, began to grow. What do I do now? He whispered. You figure out if you love her enough to stop being afraid. Marcus spent 2 sleepless nights wrestling with Sarah's words. Friday morning found him standing across the street from Sterling Enterprises headquarters, watching employees stream into the gleaming tower. For an hour he stood there, building courage like laying bricks, one small piece at a time. When he finally entered the marble lobby, the security guard looked him up and down skeptically. I'm here to see Victoria Sterling, Marcus said. Do you have an appointment? No, but Ms. Sterling doesn't see anyone without an appointment. The guard's tone was dismissive, and Marcus wondered if he'd seen the news coverage. Could you just call up and tell her Marcus Thompson is here? The guard reluctantly picked up his phone, spoke briefly, then hung up with surprise. 37th floor. Express elevator. The ride up felt endless. Marcus's reflection in the polished elevator doors showed a man who'd spent 3 weeks in emotional exile. Tired, uncertain, but determined. When the doors opened, he stepped into a world of understated luxury. Soft grey carpets, contemporary artwork, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. Mr. Thompson, a professional woman in her 50s, approached. I'm Helen Martinez, Ms. Sterling's assistant. She's in a board meeting, but she asked me to tell you she'll be free in 20 minutes. Would you like coffee while you wait? Just water, please. Helen led him to a comfortable seating area near Victoria's corner office. Through the glass walls, Marcus could see into the conference room, where Victoria sat at the head of a long table, commanding the attention of a dozen suited executives. She wore a charcoal business suit, her hair pulled back severely, every inch the powerful CEO. But Marcus noticed what others might miss, the slight tension in her shoulders, the way she rubbed her temple when she thought no one was looking. She looked tired, stressed. "She's been working 18-hour days since the article came out," Helen said quietly, following his gaze, "trying to prove she's not distracted by personal matters. Because of me. Because of small-minded people who can't imagine a successful woman making choices based on her heart instead of her portfolio." The meeting broke up, and executives filed out, most nodding respectfully to Helen as they passed. Victoria remained at the conference table, gathering papers. She hadn't seen Marcus yet. "You can go in now," Helen said. Marcus walked to the conference room door and knocked softly. Victoria looked up, and the papers in her hands scattered to the floor. "Marcus." His name escaped her lips like a prayer. They stood there for a moment, separated by glass and 3 weeks of hurt. Victoria looked smaller somehow, vulnerable in a way that had nothing to do with her physical size. "Can we talk?" Marcus asked. Victoria nodded, unable to speak. She led him into her office, closing the door behind them. The space was impressive. A massive desk, leather furniture, awards and diplomas lining the walls. But Marcus's attention was caught by a framed photo on her desk. Her father, the plumber's son, in work clothes and a hard hat, arm around a teenage Victoria at a construction site. "I owe you an apology," Marcus began. "No, you don't." Victoria's voice was steady, but her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "You were humiliated in the most public way possible. I understand why you—" "I was a coward," Marcus interrupted. "I let fear make my decisions instead of trusting what I felt here." He touched his chest. "Sarah showed me the truth about the article, about Judge Henley, but that's not why I'm here." Victoria waited, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. "I'm here because I've spent 3 weeks miserable without you. Because Saturday night was the best night of my life, not despite the fancy setting, but because I was with you. Because you saw something in me that I'm still learning to see in myself." A tear escaped Victoria's carefully controlled composure. "Marcus, I need you to understand. My world comes with challenges. There will always be people like Patricia Henley who want to tear down anything that doesn't fit their narrow definitions. Then we'll face them together." Marcus stepped closer. "If you'll have me." "Are you sure? Really sure? Because once you're in my life publicly, there's no going back to anonymity." Marcus thought about his father, who'd taught him that the most important structures were built to last, brick by brick, with patience and care. "Victoria, I've spent my whole life building things for other people. I'd like to try building something with you." She closed the distance between them then, and when she kissed him, Marcus tasted salt from her tears and the sweetness of hope renewed. 2 months later, Marcus stood in Chef Antoine Dubois' kitchen, flour in his hair and sauce on his apron, laughing as Victoria attempted to flip a crepe and sent it flying across the stainless steel workspace. "Merde!" Chef Dubois exclaimed, his French accent thick with exasperation. "Ms. Sterling, you're trying to throw the crepe to the ceiling, not turn it over." "I'm better with corporate mergers than French cooking," Victoria admitted, grinning at Marcus. "Maybe you should try." Their relationship had settled into something beautiful and real over the past 8 weeks. They'd had quiet dinners at Marcus's favorite diner, long walks along Lake Michigan, and evenings in Victoria's apartment where she'd taught him to appreciate wine while he'd shown her how to properly use power tools for a bookshelf project. The media attention had died down, helped by Sarah's investigative piece exposing Judge Henley's vendetta and market manipulation. Victoria had also made strategic appearances with Marcus at Chicago Bulls games and neighborhood festivals, normalizing their relationship in the public eye. "Marcus, your turn," Chef Dubois commanded, handing him a ladle of batter. Marcus poured the crepe into the pan, watching it spread evenly. When the edges began to brown, he slid the spatula underneath and flipped it smoothly. "Perfect." "Bien," Chef Dubois beamed. "You have the hands for this. Very steady, very sure." Practice with precision," Marcus said, catching Victoria's proud smile. They were making dinner for 8, Victoria's idea to host an intimate gathering at her penthouse apartment. The guest list was carefully chosen. Sarah and her new boyfriend, Helen Martinez, and her husband, Dr. Chang from the gala, who turned out to be genuinely kind, and Jimmy Rodriguez, who was still starstruck at being invited to a Millionaire's dinner party. The ossobuco needs 30 more minutes, Chef Dubois announced, but the appetizers are ready for your guests. Back in Victoria's apartment, Marcus marveled again at how the space had changed. When he'd first visited, it had felt like a museum, beautiful but sterile. Now it showed signs of life, his work boots by the door, a half-finished crossword puzzle on the coffee table, framed photos of them together, mixed in with Victoria's formal portraits. The guests arrived in waves. Sarah embraced Victoria warmly. They'd become genuine friends. Jimmy stood in the doorway for a full minute, taking in the panoramic city views and museum-quality artwork. "Dude," he whispered to Marcus, "your girlfriend's apartment is bigger than my entire block." "She's not my girlfriend," Marcus said quietly, causing everyone to turn and stare. Victoria's face went pale. "Marcus." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "She's the woman I want to marry." The room erupted. Sarah squealed. Helen clapped her hands together. Jimmy's mouth fell open. Dr. Chang smiled broadly. But Marcus only saw Victoria, whose green eyes had filled with tears of joy. "Victoria Sterling," Marcus said, dropping to one knee in front of her floor-to-ceiling windows with Chicago sparkling below them. "You taught me that love isn't about deserving each other. It's about choosing each other every day, regardless of what the world thinks. Will you marry me?" Victoria's hands flew to her mouth. For a moment she couldn't speak. Then she laughed through her tears and dropped to her knees in front of him. "Marcus Thompson, you beautiful, brave, wonderful man. Yes, 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 yes." The ring was simple, a classic solitaire that had cost Marcus 3 months' salary. But as he slipped it onto Victoria's finger, it looked perfect against her hand. Their friends surrounded them with hugs and congratulations, but Marcus was only aware of Victoria in his arms, whispering against his ear, "I love you. I love your honest hands and your kind heart, and the way you make me want to be the best version of myself." "I love you too," he whispered back. "My brilliant, beautiful, impossible woman." Later, as their guests enjoyed Chef Dubois' masterpiece dinner, Victoria pulled Marcus onto her private balcony. The November air was crisp, and she curled into his side for warmth. "Are you ready for this?" she asked. "A lifetime of being Victoria Sterling's husband, because it won't always be easy." Marcus looked out over the city where he'd been born and raised, where he'd learned his trade and found his purpose. Now it sparkled with new possibility. "As long as it's with you," he said, "I'm ready for anything." What neither of them knew was that in 6 months, Judge Patricia Henley would be arrested for fraud and market manipulation, and Victoria would be offered the contract to renovate Chicago's historic courthouse, a project she would insist Marcus oversee personally, bringing their story full circle. Spring arrived with unprecedented warmth, and Marcus found himself standing in the most unlikely place imaginable, the historic Chicago courthouse, wearing a hard hat that read Project Supervisor and reviewing architectural blueprints with a team of engineers. The original stonework was completed in 1889, explained Janet Morrison, the city's preservation architect. "We need to maintain the historical integrity while updating the infrastructure. It's a delicate balance." Marcus studied the plans, his experienced eye noting potential challenges. "The foundation looks solid, but we'll need to reinforce the east wall before we start on the windows, and this weather stripping here," he pointed to a section of the blueprint. "We can use modern materials that look period appropriate." 6 months ago, he'd been laying bricks for other people's buildings. Now he was supervising the restoration of one of Chicago's most important landmarks, a $15 million project that Sterling Enterprises had won in a highly competitive bid. "Mr. Thompson," a young apprentice mason approached nervously. "The news crew is here for the interview." Marcus's stomach tightened slightly. Media attention still made him uncomfortable, but he'd learned to handle it with Victoria's coaching. Today's interview was about the courthouse project, not his personal life, though he knew they'd probably ask about the wedding plans. The reporter was Linda Kim from Channel 7, professional and direct. Mr. Thompson, how does it feel to go from working construction to supervising a project of this magnitude? It feels like a natural progression, Marcus answered honestly. I've been working with stone and mortar for 17 years. This project just happens to have more people watching. And your relationship with Victoria Sterling? Any concerns about conflicts of interest? Marcus had anticipated this question. Ms. Sterling recused herself from the selection committee. Sterling Enterprises won this contract based on our proposal and track record, nothing else. I was chosen as supervisor because of my experience with historical preservation, not because of my personal relationships. It was true. Marcus had spent months studying historical building techniques, working with master craftsmen, earning his credentials through competency, not connections. After the interview, Marcus walked through the courthouse's main hall, marveling at the soaring ceilings and intricate stonework his predecessors had created over a century ago. His phone buzzed, a text from Victoria. Watched your interview online. You were perfect. Proud of you. See you tonight for dinner with my mother. Marcus smiled, then immediately felt nervous. Tonight would be his first meeting with Eleanor Sterling, Victoria's mother, who'd been traveling in Europe during their engagement. Victoria had warned him that Eleanor was formidable. That evening, Marcus stood in Victoria's apartment, adjusting his tie for the third time. He'd chosen his best suit, still not designer quality, but clean and well-fitted. You look wonderful, Victoria said, appearing in a simple black dress that somehow managed to be both elegant and understated. Remember, my mother's bark is worse than her bite. That's supposed to be reassuring. She raised a daughter who fell in love with a mason. Deep down, she appreciates authenticity. The doorbell rang, and Victoria went to answer it. Marcus heard a crisp, authoritative voice. Victoria, darling, you look lovely. And where is this young man I've heard so much about? Eleanor Sterling entered the living room like a force of nature. Tall, silver-haired and impeccably dressed, she radiated the kind of old-money confidence that could intimidate senators. Her pale blue eyes assessed Marcus with surgical precision. Mrs. Sterling, Marcus said, extending his hand, it's an honor to meet you. Eleanor's handshake was firm, her gaze unwavering. Mr. Thompson, I understand you're renovating our courthouse. Yes, ma'am. It's an incredible project. I was on the Preservation Society board when we first proposed that renovation 15 years ago. Tell me, what's your approach to balancing historical accuracy with modern functionality? For the next 20 minutes, Eleanor grilled Marcus about architecture, preservation techniques, and building codes. But unlike Judge Henley's condescending questions at the gala, these came from genuine knowledge and interest. Eleanor Sterling knew buildings. Your approach to the window restoration is particularly thoughtful, she finally said. Most contractors would simply replace everything with modern materials. The original craftsmen used techniques that lasted 130 years, Marcus replied. We should honor that when possible. Eleanor smiled, the first warm expression she'd shown all evening. Victoria, you chose well. Your father would have liked him. Over dinner, Eleanor shared stories about Robert Sterling's early struggles. People forget that my husband was once dismissed as new money by Chicago society. They said he didn't belong in boardrooms or country clubs, but he built something lasting, something that mattered. What changed their minds? Marcus asked. Time, results, and the realization that character matters more than pedigree. Eleanor looked meaningfully at Marcus. It also helped that he married a woman who didn't care what they thought. Victoria laughed. Mother, are you giving Marcus relationship advice? I'm telling him that the Sterling women have a history of making unconventional choices that work out beautifully. Eleanor raised her wineglass. 2 unconventional choices. They toasted, and Marcus felt something settle in his chest. Acceptance, belonging, the sense that he'd found his place not just with Victoria but with her family. Later, as Eleanor prepared to leave, she pulled Marcus aside. "Mr. Thompson, my daughter has never been happier. In business, she's always been formidable. But you've helped her discover joy. That's a gift." "She's given me everything," Marcus replied. "Confidence, purpose, love I never thought I deserved." Eleanor patted his arm. "You deserve it all, dear boy. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." 1 year later, Marcus stood at the altar of St. James Cathedral, his hands steady despite the magnitude of the moment. The late afternoon sun streamed through stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across the stone floor his crew had restored just months earlier. The cathedral was full, but not crowded, 200 guests who truly mattered to Marcus and Victoria. Jimmy Rodriguez sat in the front row, wearing his first tuxedo and grinning like he'd won the lottery. Sarah dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, her husband holding her hand. Dr. Chang and his wife smiled warmly. Helen Martinez beamed from her seat with Victoria's business associates. Eleanor Sterling sat in the front row, regal in navy blue, her initial skepticism long since transformed into genuine affection. Beside her sat Marcus's surprise guest, his elderly former boss, Mr. Patterson, who'd initially fired him from Sterling Enterprises projects but had become one of his strongest advocates. The organ music swelled, and Marcus's breath caught as Victoria appeared at the back of the cathedral. She was radiant in ivory silk, her dress simple and elegant, her grandmother's pearls at her throat. But it was her smile that made Marcus's heart race. Pure joy, excitement, love without reservation. As she walked down the aisle, Marcus thought about the journey that had brought them here. The courthouse renovation had been completed on time and under budget, earning Marcus recognition in architectural journals. Sterling Enterprises had grown by 30%, with Victoria being named Chicago Businesswoman of the Year. But more importantly, they'd built something together, a partnership based on mutual respect, shared dreams, and the kind of love that makes both people better. "Dearly beloved," Father McKenna began, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of Victoria Catherine Sterling and Marcus James Thompson." The ceremony was traditional, but personal. They'd written their own vows, and when Victoria spoke hers, her voice carried clearly through the cathedral. "Marcus, you taught me that love isn't about finding someone who fits into your world. It's about building a new world together. You showed me that strength comes in many forms, that wisdom isn't measured by education or wealth, but by kindness and integrity. I promise to support your dreams, to challenge you when you doubt yourself, and to love you with the same steadiness you bring to everything you build." Marcus's vows were simpler but no less heartfelt. "Victoria, you saw something in me I couldn't see in myself. You believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. You taught me that I deserve happiness, that love isn't about earning someone's affection, but about choosing to build something beautiful together. I promise to love you, to protect you, to make you laugh when you're taking yourself too seriously, and to build whatever life you want to share with me." When Father McKenna pronounced them husband and wife, Marcus kissed Victoria with the certainty of a man who'd found his home. The reception was held at the Art Institute, with dinner catered by Chef Dubois and dancing under the stars in the sculpture garden. Marcus had learned to waltz properly now, though he still preferred swaying slowly to jazz standards. "Any regrets?" Victoria whispered as they danced to their song, "The Way You Look Tonight." "Just one," Marcus said, pulling her closer, "that it took me so long to realize I was worth loving. And now?" Marcus looked around at their guests, friends from both worlds, united in celebration. Judge Patricia Henley was serving 2 years in federal prison, her attempts to destroy their happiness having backfired spectacularly. The courthouse restoration had won 3 architectural awards. Victoria's business continued to thrive, now with Marcus as head of historical projects. But none of that mattered as much as the woman in his arms. "Now I know that love isn't about deserving each other," Marcus said, echoing words he'd spoken a year ago. It's about choosing each other, building something together, and having the courage to believe we're worthy of happiness. As the song ended, applause filled the garden, but Marcus barely heard it. He was too busy marveling at his wife, brilliant, beautiful Victoria Sterling Thompson, who'd seen potential in a working-class mason and loved him into becoming the man he was meant to be. The evening ended with sparklers and laughter, with promises to visit and invitations extended. As the last guest departed, Marcus and Victoria stood alone in the sculpture garden, Chicago's skyline glittering beyond them. "Ready for forever?" Victoria asked, her hand in his. Marcus squeezed her fingers, thinking of the home they'd bought in Lincoln Park, the children they'd talked about having, the buildings they'd restore together, the life they'd create brick by brick. "With you," he said, kissing her forehead. "I've been ready since the moment you handed me that invitation and believed I belonged in your world." "Our world," Victoria corrected. "We built this together." And as they walked toward their future, hand in hand, Marcus knew she was right. They'd built something beautiful, something lasting, something worthy of the love that had created it.